We're going to take a little bit of a detour away from FM synthesis, and we're going to look at how we can use FM8 as a subtractive synthesizer as we take our first look at FM8's filter. We've already seen how, with FM synthesis, we don't have to rely on filters for tone control anymore, but of course in subtractive synthesis, the filter is an integral part of shaping and moulding the sound. First things first, I want to start with two sawtooth waves. Now, there are two ways we can get a sawtooth wave in FM8, and one of those is we can make a sine wave feed back on itself until it becomes a sawtooth wave. So if we look at the spectrum, if I click here above operator F and drag, you'll see that as it adds more and more harmonics, as it feeds back on itself, it becomes closer and closer to a saw wave. It's around 43, 44, and as you go higher than that, as more and more frequencies are introduced to the signal, it just becomes more and more chaotic until it's essentially just noise, like this. The other way we can get a sawtooth wave is simply selecting one from the list of waveforms, and that's what I'm going to do on operator E. I'm going to right click to turn that on. So now we've got two similar but subtly different sawtooth waves. I'm going to put them both on key sync mode so they're synchronized. And I'm going to pan them hard left and hard right. So if I click down here underneath E, drag it downwards all the way, click underneath F, drag it upwards all the way. Now you might be able to tell that F is a little bit brighter than E, it's a bit harmonically richer. So I'm just going to give E a little bit of feedback just to add to the harmonic content in there. I'm going to detune them slightly, just changing the ratio values fairly subtly. When you're detuning two operators, it's better to do it with the ratio than it is to do with the offset hertz, because if we offset them by a particular frequency, it's not logarithmic, it's linear, and what that means is that the detuning will be more extreme the lower down the keyboard. You'll see what I mean if I just offset this a little bit. You'll hear that the lower down the keyboard, the more detuned it is. Now in certain circumstances that might be an effect you want, but today we don't want that effect, we want it to be uniform across the keyboard, so I'm going to go onto our envelopes page, and so that our operators don't have quite so abrupt a decay, I'm going to give them a little bit of a release. So if I link F to E like that, just pull the release out there a little bit. And to thicken up the sound some more, I'm going to go onto the master page. I'm going to give it more voices. I'm going to put that up to 10. Now, remember, when you add more voices, it gets exponentially louder. So don't forget to pull down this volume knob a bit to compensate. I'm going to detune them a bit, and I'm going to pan them. And on this quality panel, I'm going to turn analog up a bit to introduce a bit of random detuning. So now we've got a nice big sound to start subtracting from. So if I go back to Expert, what I want to do is pull these down so they're no longer routed to the master, and instead I want to route them to operator Z, which is our filter. So if I click Z, we can see our filter. Now they're basically two filters, and you can change the way they're routed using this routing panel. With this mix knob here, you can decide what balance of filter 1 and filter 2 you want, and this knob beneath the mix knob determines whether they're ran in parallel or series. So when it's fully panned to the left, the signal is split, goes into the two filters, and then is mixed together at the other end. When it's panned fully right, the signal goes into filter 1 and then into filter 2. Anywhere in between that is a mix. It's a balance between parallel or series. The cutoff knob controls the cutoff for both filters, whilst the spread knob offsets the cutoff of filter 2. And each filter has its own resonance knob. So basically, when the spread is on 0, the cutoff of both filters is exactly the same. And when you start to turn the spread up, filter 2's cutoff becomes higher and higher in relation to filter 1's cutoff. These mode knobs determine whether it's a low-pass filter or a high-pass filter or a band-pass filter. So when the knob is fully over to the left, it's rolling off everything above the cutoff. When it's fully over to the right, it's rolling off everything below the cutoff. And in the centre, it's rolling off everything on either side. Today, we want it to be a low-pass filter. We're going to give it a bit of resonance, and we're going to keep the routing as it is. Down here, of course, we've got our amp mod section, and just like all of the other operators, we can use this to route modulation to operator Z. It's just that that modulation is controlling filter cutoff rather than amplitude as it would be on our normal operators. So for example, we could route LFO1 to our cutoff. And you can also see or change that routing on the mod page. See, we've got LFO1 going to operator Z. And whenever you are using one of the LFOs to control the filter cutoff, remember that key scale and velocity scale are set to 50 by default, so you may want to pull those down. But we're not going to stick with the LFO today. We're going to use operator Z's envelope. So if we turn up env8, we can also use the velocity knob to determine to what extent velocity affects our frequency cutoff. So as you can see, as well as being a really powerful FM synthesizer, FM8 is potentially an equally powerful subtractive synthesizer. And we don't just have to do this with sawtooth waves. We could turn on operator D, choose a square wave and route that in. We could maybe make it an octave higher. And we could add in a bit of noise using operator X. If I turn that on, turn our amplitude up. Just to further brighten the sound a bit. And lastly, I'm just going to quickly add some effects to make the sound even bigger. Give it a bit of chorus. I'm going to turn down the dry wet a little bit and turn up the mod depth slightly. Give it a bit of reverb, not too wet. Turn the time up a bit, and a bit of side delay. And I'm going to turn the time down a bit, put it on sync mode, turn the feedback down a little bit. Again, back off the dry wet slightly. So there you have it, a big subtractive pad in FM8. In the next video, we're going to look at some of the crazy things we can do when we route external audio into FM8. So don't go away.